There comes a moment in life when a person has to ask a dangerous question. What if the thing I have been calling fear is actually the doorway to the life I was meant to live? What if every time I stepped back, doubted myself, stayed small, settled, delayed, hesitated, I was not protecting myself, but postponing the very life my soul has been aching for? Because maybe what exhausts you is not life itself, but resisting the call inside you. The call to become more honest, more brave, more surrendered, more alive. Because deep down you know there's a version of you that keeps knocking. A version untouched by the limitations fear taught you. A version not ruled by old wounds. A version that does not apologize for existing. A version stronger than the one survival created. And maybe the reason you feel restless lately is because that deeper self is trying to wake up. Because holy restlessness is often the beginning of transformation. It is the soul refusing to stay asleep. And maybe what you have called confusion is awakening. Maybe what you have called dissatisfaction is calling. Maybe what you have called discomfort is growth asking to begin. Because what if you were never created merely to survive another week, but to rise into something vast, beautiful, and meaningful? What if the life you dream about is not far away in some unreachable future, but waiting behind the fears you keep negotiating with? And what if the cost of staying small is greater than the risk of becoming? Think about that. Because people often think courage feels powerful, but real courage often feels trembling. It feels uncertain. It feels vulnerable, yet it moves anyway. And maybe what your life needs is not more certainty. Maybe it needs one act of trembling courage. One honest yes. One refusal to keep running from what your spirit already knows. Because maybe you have not been afraid of failure. Maybe you have been afraid of your own expansion. Afraid of becoming who you could be. Because that would require leaving old identities behind. Yet what if freedom lives there? What if the life you were meant to live begins the moment you stop running from it? What if this moment is that moment? What if today something changes because you finally decide the fear does not lead anymore? Because maybe the life you were meant for has been waiting long enough. Imagine if every obstacle in your life carried a hidden invitation. Not merely something to overcome, but something trying to initiate you into deeper strength. Because what if hardship has not only opposed you, but introduced you to you, the stronger you, the deeper you, the truer you? Because there are parts of us only struggle reveals. You do not discover endurance in comfort. You do not discover depth in applause. You do not discover faith when nothing shakes. Some treasures are buried inside resistance. And maybe your battles have contained gifts you have been too wounded to notice. Because perhaps what broke your illusions built discernment. What slowed you down built wisdom. What disappointed you built spiritual depth. And what if one day you look back and realize your hardest seasons taught you how to become someone your old self could never have imagined? Because maybe every time life pressed you, something sacred was forged. And maybe what you keep calling scars, heaven calls training. What if that is true? Then your story is not one of repeated pain. It is one of formation. And formation changes how you interpret struggle. Because then struggle is not meaningless. It is shaping. And maybe the next chapter of your life depends on recognizing that you are not broken by what happened to you. You have been built through it. There's a difference. And maybe today, that difference matters. Because once a person realizes their pain has not disqualified them, but deepened them, something changes forever. Shame loosens. Strength returns. Identity heals. And perhaps that is what is happening in you now. Because maybe you've spent too long seeing yourself through wounds instead of through resilience. Too long identifying with survival instead of calling. But what if your life was never meant to be defined by what hurt you, but by what rose in you because of it? Because maybe greatness has been growing under grief. Maybe courage has been growing under exhaustion. Maybe destiny has been maturing beneath delay. And maybe it is time to stop seeing yourself as someone merely recovering and start seeing yourself as someone becoming. There's a strange tragedy in living beneath the size of your soul, in knowing somewhere inside that you were made for more, yet continuing to negotiate with smaller living, smaller faith, smaller dreams, smaller courage. And maybe many people do not fail because they lack ability, but because they keep agreeing with limitation. And what if today you stopped agreeing? What if you stopped agreeing with the lie that your best days are behind you, that it is too late, that you missed something, that change belongs to other people? What if you rejected that narrative completely? Because what if possibility is far closer than despair has told you? Because maybe what you call ordinary life still carries unopened miracles, unused courage, untouched purpose. Because maybe there are dimensions of your life you have not entered simply because fear convinced you not to try. But what if you tried? What if you believed? What if you moved? Because motion reveals what thought alone never can. And perhaps you have been overthinking doors that can only be understood by walking through them. Because clarity often comes after obedience, not before. And maybe your breakthrough is hidden in movement. Not perfect movement, just movement. Because stagnant fear lies, but courage discovers. And maybe there is a discovery waiting in the step you keep postponing. Because maybe you were not meant to spend your life preparing to live. Maybe you were meant to live fully, bravely, awake. And maybe today is a summons back into aliveness. There are moments when heaven whispers through disruption, when what feels like interruption is actually invitation. And maybe some of what unsettled your life was not sent to ruin direction, but corrected. Because sometimes things fall apart because they no longer fit who you are becoming. And maybe endings have felt cruel only because you mistook pruning for loss. But what if pruning protects fruit? What if letting go makes room? What if closed chapters are not evidence life diminished, but evidence life is making room for expansion? Because maybe something bigger cannot enter while you keep clinging to what has expired. And maybe this season is asking release. Not because God wants less for you, because He wants more. And maybe surrender is not defeat. It is access. Access to the life beyond old attachments, beyond outdated fears, beyond identities built in survival. And maybe there is extraordinary freedom on the other side of release. Maybe that is where peace has been waiting. Maybe that is where your future breathes. What if transformation is not becoming someone else, but finally becoming who you have always been beneath fear? That changes everything, because then growth is not performing. It is returning. Returning to truth. Returning to courage. Returning to design. And maybe what your spirit longs for is return. Not achievement. Return to the self God dreamed before wounds taught you hiding. And maybe all this longing you feel is homesickness for your truest self. And what if this whole journey has been calling you home? Home to peace. Home to purpose. Home to identity. Because maybe salvation in some sense is not merely rescue from darkness, but restoration into design. And maybe you are being restored, even now, quietly. And perhaps the miracle you seek is already happening in the slow return of your soul to itself. And what if one day, much sooner than you imagine, you wake up and realize the life you kept postponing has begun? Not because fear vanished, but because you stopped obeying it. Not because certainty arrived, but because courage did. And maybe you will look back at this moment as the threshold, the place where smaller living ended, the place where you stopped running, the place where your yes changed the architecture of your future. Because one yes can do that. One surrendered yes. One brave yes. One trembling yes. And maybe yours is waiting now. Maybe history in your life bends at this decision. Maybe generations after you are touched by this courage. Maybe far more is at stake than you know. Because destiny often hides inside simple obedience. And maybe the life you were meant to live has been waiting at the edge of one brave yes. If so, why wait longer? Step, believe, rise, begin.